The smoke detector's scream pierced through Peter Matthews's skull at 2:17 in the morning, but it was the sound of a woman's desperate sobbing 3 floors above that made his blood turn to ice. He stood frozen in the stairwell, one hand on the railing leading down to safety, the other gripping the banister that led up into thickening black smoke. His daughter was safe at his sister's house. He had nothing keeping him in this building. Every rational thought in his head screamed at him to run, but that voice upstairs, raw with terror, wouldn't stop calling for help. Peter's lungs were already burning as he yanked his t-shirt over his nose and climbed. Heat radiated through the walls. The building groaned around him like a dying animal. He'd been a senior combat medic in the army before his engineering career, before his wife died, before everything fell apart. He knew what smoke inhalation did to the human body, knew he had maybe 4 minutes before his own body shut down. He kicked through the penthouse door, and hell itself opened up before him. Flames consumed everything, expensive furniture exploding into cascades of sparks, melting a crystal chandelier that crashed 5 feet from where he crouched. The heat was a physical force trying to shove him back. Through the inferno, he spotted movement near the bedroom. A figure collapsed on imported marble flooring, one arm reaching helplessly toward a balcony door, sealed shut by a security system that had failed when the power cut. Peter dropped to his stomach and army crawled forward, his shoulders screaming as he dragged himself across scorching floor. The woman wasn't moving anymore. He grabbed her wrist, found a pulse, thready and weak. She was dressed in silk pajamas that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Dark hair fanned across the floor, unconscious but alive. He hooked his arms under her shoulders and pulled, his back muscles threatening to tear as he hauled them both backward toward the door. A support beam crashed down where they'd been seconds before, sending up a fountain of embers that seared through his shirt. Peter bit back a scream and kept moving. The stairwell was their only chance. Each flight down was an eternity. His vision tunneled. His legs turned to rubber. The woman's dead weight seemed to multiply with every step. His body wanted to quit, wanted to just sit down and rest, which was how smoke inhalation killed you. It made dying seem easier than surviving. But Peter had a 10-year-old daughter who'd already lost one parent. Lily couldn't lose him too. That thought, just that single image of his little girl's face, kept his feet moving even when everything else failed. They burst through the ground floor exit into cool night air that felt like resurrection. Peter's knees buckled. He went down hard on the concrete, still clutching the unconscious woman against his chest as sirens wailed closer. Paramedics swarmed them immediately, trying to pry her from his arms, but his muscles had locked up. Someone had to physically break his grip. As they lifted her onto a gurney and strapped an oxygen mask over her face, Peter caught his first clear look at her features under the harsh ambulance lights. His entire world stopped. It couldn't be. The universe couldn't possibly be this cruel. But there was no mistaking that face. He'd stared at it across an enormous glass desk 6 months ago while she delivered the words that destroyed his life. While she'd explained in her calm, measured CEO voice that his 12 years of a loyal service didn't matter because the company was restructuring and his position had been eliminated, while she'd watched him fall apart and hadn't blinked once. Vanessa Westbrook, billionaire, CEO of Martinez Technologies, the woman whose signature on a termination letter had cost Peter his house, his daughter's school, his health insurance, his entire sense of identity and worth. The woman he'd just risked his life to save. Peter staggered backward, coughing so hard he thought his ribs would crack. A paramedic tried to guide him toward another ambulance, but he shook them off. His hands were blistered. His lungs felt like they'd been scrubbed with steel wool. Burns covered his arms where embers had eaten through fabric. He could barely stand. But he couldn't look away from Vanessa Westbrook's unconscious form as they loaded her into the ambulance. Her eyes flickered open for just a moment, unfocused and confused, scanning the chaos around her. For one brief second, her gaze landed on Peter. There was no recognition, no understanding. just fear and disorientation before her eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness again. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The vehicle screamed away into the night, lights painting the street in urgent red and blue. Firefighters shouted orders, dragging hoses toward the burning building. Residents huddled on the sidewalk in bathrobes and shock, filming everything on their phones. And Peter stood there alone, smoke-stained and trembling, staring at his blistered hands and trying to process what he'd just done. He'd saved her. The woman who'd shown him no mercy. The woman who hadn't even remembered his name when she fired him, just called him Mr. Matthews, like he was any other disposable employee. He'd literally carried her through fire. The logical part of his brain, the part that had earned him an engineering degree and a medical discharge with honours, told him he'd done the right thing, that human life had value regardless of personal history, that letting someone burn to death because they'd wronged you would make you a monster. But there was another part, a darker part he didn't like acknowledging, that whispered he'd made a terrible mistake, that Vanessa Martinez would never have risked anything for him, that he'd just proven himself to be exactly what she'd always seen him as, expendable, useful when needed, ultimately forgettable. "Sir, you need medical attention." A female paramedic appeared at his elbow, her voice gentle but firm. "You've got second-degree burns, and your oxygen saturation is dangerously low." "I'm fine," Peter rasped, though he absolutely wasn't. "You're not fine. You could have permanent lung damage. Please, let us help you." Peter let her lead him to an ambulance, too exhausted to argue. As she cleaned his burns and fitted him with an oxygen mask, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Somehow, it had survived. A text from his sister Sarah lit up the cracked screen. "Lily wants to video chat before bed. She made a new robot today and wants to show you." Peter's throat tightened. His daughter. His reason for everything. He pulled off the oxygen mask long enough to type back, "Tell her I'll call in 10 minutes. Love you both." The paramedic frowned at him. "Sir, you need to go to the hospital. I need to talk to my daughter." Peter's voice came out harder than he intended. "Then I'll go, I promise." She didn't look happy, but she nodded and moved to help other victims. Peter video called his sister, and Lily's face appeared on screen, gap-toothed smile brighter than any fire. "Daddy, look what I built." She held up a small robot made from a kit he'd bought her, its little LED eyes blinking. "That's amazing, sweetheart." Peter fought to keep his voice steady, to not let her hear the rasp of damaged lungs, or see the burns on his arms that he kept just off camera. "Did you use the soldering iron safely?" "Aunt Sarah helped with that part, but I did all the programming myself." Lily's pride was infectious. "Are you okay, Daddy? You sound funny." "Just tired, kiddo. Long day." The lie tasted like ash. "But I'm so proud of you. You're going to be an even better engineer than your old man." They talked for 10 more minutes, Lily chattering about her robot's features, while Peter just drank in the sight of her. This perfect little human, who'd somehow survived her mother's death and her father's downward spiral and still believed the world was full of good things. When they finally said goodnight, Peter let the paramedic take him to the hospital. The ER was chaos, overflowing with victims from the fire. Peter waited for 3 hours in a plastic chair before a tired resident finally saw him, bandaged his burns, gave him breathing treatments, and sent him home with prescriptions he couldn't afford and strict instructions to follow up with a pulmonologist. Peter took an Uber back to the apartment building just as dawn was breaking. The penthouse was a blackened skeleton, but the fire had been contained to the top 2 floors. His buddy Mike's apartment on the 4th floor had smoke and water damage, but was structurally sound. Peter trudged up the stairs, every muscle screaming, and collapsed onto the couch without even taking off his smoke-stained clothes. He slept for 14 hours straight, dreamless and deep, his body shutting down to heal. When he finally woke, it was dark again, nearly midnight. His phone was dead. His mouth tasted like he'd been licking an ashtray. Every inch of his body hurt. Peter plugged in his phone and watched it slowly come to life. 17 missed calls, 34 text messages, most from his sister checking on him, 3 from his buddy Mike wanting to know what the hell had happened, 2 from Marcus Chen, his old supervisor from Martinez Technologies, saying, "Dude, call me," and 1 from an unknown number with a simple message. "Mr. Matthews, this is Robert Keller, Ms. Vanessa Westbrook's executive assistant. Ms. Martinez would like to speak with you regarding last night's events. Please call at your earliest convenience." Peter stared at that message for a long time. Part of him wanted to delete it, to pretend he'd never seen it, to just disappear before Vanessa Martinez could do whatever she was planning. But another part, the part that had climbed those stairs into the fire, that had spent 12 years believing in doing the right thing even when it cost you, that part was curious. What did Vanessa Martinez want with him? He called the number. Robert Keller answered on the first ring, his voice crisp and professional, even at midnight. "Mr. Matthews, thank you for returning my call. Ms. Martinez has been asking about you since she regained full consciousness this afternoon." Peter's grip tightened on his phone. "How is she?" "Recovering well, thanks to you. The doctors say another 2 minutes and the smoke inhalation would have caused irreversible brain damage." Keller paused. "Mr. Matthews, Ms. Martinez would like to meet with you tomorrow. She's offering $10,000 simply for your time. 1 hour of conversation, no strings attached." $10,000. The number hit Peter like a physical blow. That was 3 months of rent in a decent apartment. That was getting Lily back into her old school with the robotics program she loved. That was the surgery his sister needed, but kept postponing because she couldn't afford the deductible. That was breathing room, actual breathing room for the first time in 6 months. "Why?" Peter's voice came out hoarse, damaged from the smoke. "Ms. Martinez believes in compensating people appropriately when they provide extraordinary service." Keller's tone suggested he'd given this speech before. "A car will arrive at your location at 2 p.m. tomorrow. The meeting will take place at her private residence, as she's not yet cleared to return to the office." "Her residence burned down last night," Peter pointed out. "Her primary residence, the estate in Millbrook Heights. Of course, she had multiple residences." 1 hour, Mr. Matthews. $10,000, cash or direct deposit, your choice. All we need is a yes." Peter closed his eyes. He knew this was a mistake, knew that accepting money from Vanessa Martinez would create some kind of obligation, some invisible thread connecting him to a woman who'd already proven she had the power to destroy his life. But Lily needed new shoes. His sister needed help. And Peter himself was holding prescriptions he couldn't fill without money he didn't have. "I'll be ready at 2, he said quietly, and hated himself a little for it. The car that arrived the next day wasn't just nice, it was obscene. A midnight blue Mercedes S-Class with leather seats that probably cost more than Peter's first car. The driver, a silent man in a black suit, held the door open without making eye contact. Peter climbed in, wearing his only pair of jeans without holes, and a button-down shirt he'd ironed twice trying to get the wrinkles out. His bandaged hands made everything awkward. Millbrook Heights was 40 minutes outside the city, where old money built estates behind iron gates and manicured hedges. The Martinez property sat at the end of a private drive lined with oak trees that had to be over 100 years old. The house itself, mansion, really, was a sprawling modern masterpiece of glass and stone that looked like something from an architecture magazine. It probably had a name. Rich people always named their houses. Robert Keller met Peter at the front entrance, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested military background. "Mr. Matthews, welcome. Ms. Martinez is waiting in the solarium. Please, follow me." They walked through rooms that seemed designed to intimidate, soaring ceilings, original artwork, furniture that looked too expensive to actually sit on. Peter caught glimpses of staff moving quietly through hallways, a housekeeper dusting priceless-looking vases, a chef visible through a restaurant-quality kitchen. This wasn't just wealth. This was generational fortune, the kind that built empires and crushed people like Peter without even noticing. The solarium was a glass-enclosed room filled with exotic plants and natural light. Vanessa Martinez sat in a high-backed chair near a fountain, dressed in casual clothes that probably cost thousands, cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse. She looked remarkably recovered for someone who'd nearly died 2 days ago, though Peter noticed the slight wheeze when she breathed, the oxygen concentrator beside her chair, the faint tremor in her hands that she tried to hide. Mr. Matthews. She stood slowly, wincing slightly. Thank you for coming. Up close, in natural light, Vanessa Martinez was different than Peter remembered. At the office, she'd been a figure of cold authority behind an enormous desk. Here, she seemed almost human. There were lines around her eyes he hadn't noticed before, grey strands in her dark hair, a vulnerability in her expression that her professional mask had hidden. Ms. Westbrook. Peter remained standing, unsure of the protocol. Did you shake hands with someone whose life you saved? Someone who'd fired you? Please, sit. And it's Vanessa. She gestured to a chair across from her. I think we can dispense with formalities given the circumstances. Peter sat, his body tense, ready to bolt. Your assistant said you wanted to talk. I wanted to thank you properly. Vanessa's voice was softer than he remembered, less of the corporate edge. You saved my life, Mr. Matthews. You ran into a burning building and carried me out when you had every reason to walk away. Anyone would have done the same. No. Vanessa shook her head firmly. Most people would have called 911 and waited for professionals. You risked everything. She paused, studying him with an intensity that made Peter uncomfortable. But that's not the most remarkable part, is it? Peter's stomach dropped. I don't know what you mean. You knew who I was. Vanessa's eyes never left his face. I saw it in your expression when the paramedics put me on that gurney. You recognized me, and you saved me anyway. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Peter could deny it, could pretend he hadn't known, but something about the directness of her gaze told him she wouldn't believe the lie. You fired me 6 months ago, Peter said finally, his voice flat. 12 years with the company. You called me into your office personally, told me my position was being eliminated, and had security escort me out within an hour. I lost my house, had to pull my daughter from her school, ended up couch surfing at a friend's apartment trying to figure out how to keep food on the table. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. I remember you now. Peter Matthews, senior engineer in renewable energy development. You were working on the solar panel efficiency project. You remember the project, not me. Peter couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. I remember 217 people I had to let go that day, Vanessa said quietly. I remember every single termination meeting, every face, every family I disrupted. You think that was easy for me, Mr. Matthews? You think I enjoyed destroying people's livelihoods? I think you did what was best for your bottom line and your shareholders. I was just collateral damage. You're right. The admission surprised him. The company was hemorrhaging money. My board was threatening a hostile takeover. I had 2 choices. Cut 200 jobs or lose everything. All 5,000 positions, the technology, the patents, everything my father built. I chose to save what I could. Congratulations. Peter's voice dripped sarcasm. I'm sure your father would be proud. Vanessa flinched like he'd slapped her. Good. Peter thought viciously. Let her feel something. My father is dead, Mr. Matthews. He died 8 months before those layoffs. Suddenly, heart attack at his desk. I was 33 years old, barely ready to run a division, much less an entire company. The board fought me on everything. Investors wanted to strip the company for parts and sell it off. I was drowning, trying to honor his legacy while keeping the whole thing from collapsing. Her voice cracked slightly. And yes, I made hard choices, Choices that hurt people, hurt you and your daughter, but I did what I had to do to survive. Peter wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to his righteous fury, but something in Vanessa's expression gave him pause. He'd been so focused on his own pain, his own loss, that he'd never considered what it might have been like on the other side of that desk. Never thought about the weight of those decisions. "Why am I here?" he asked instead. "Really? This isn't just about saying thank you." Vanessa took a breath, wincing slightly from lingering smoke damage. "Because 23 years ago, someone saved my life for the first time. And I never forgot it." Peter frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I was 19, a freshman at State University on a scholarship. My father gave me nothing, said I needed to earn my way like he had. So I worked 3 jobs, barely slept, barely ate. One night, I fell asleep on the bus after a double shift waitressing. Missed my stop by 6 blocks, ended up in a neighborhood I didn't know." Vanessa's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. 3 men followed me from the bus stop. I tried to run, but they cornered me in an alley. I thought I was going to die. And then this skinny kid appeared, maybe 20 years old, with a backpack full of engineering textbooks and this ridiculous old army jacket. He told them to leave me alone. Peter's blood turned cold. No, it couldn't be. "They laughed at him," Vanessa continued, her voice distant with memory. "He was maybe 140 pounds soaking wet, no match for 3 grown men. But he didn't back down. He stood between me and them and said, 'You're going to have to go through me.' One of them punched him in the face, gave him a black eye that swelled shut. But he didn't run. He pulled out his phone, said he was calling the cops, started describing them in detail loud enough that people in nearby apartments heard. They ran." Peter remembered that night, remembered the taste of blood in his mouth, the adrenaline shaking his hands. He'd been terrified, absolutely certain he was about to get beaten to death. But the girl had been so scared, and he'd known what happened to women in situations like that. So he'd stood his ground, and somehow, miraculously, it had worked. "The girl ran before I could even check if she was okay," Peter said slowly. "I never saw her face clearly. It was too dark. I ran because I was ashamed," Vanessa admitted. "Ashamed that I'd needed saving, that I'd been stupid enough to fall asleep on the bus. I went back the next day looking for you, but I had no idea where to start. No name, nothing. Just the memory of someone who barely knew me putting himself in danger without hesitation." She leaned forward. "Do you understand now? You've saved my life twice, Peter Matthews, 23 years apart. That's not coincidence. That's the universe giving us both a second chance." "A second chance at what?" Vanessa reached beside her chair and pulled out a leather portfolio, sliding it across the glass table between them. "Your job back. Full reinstatement with back pay for the 6 months you were gone. Promotion to team lead with a 40% salary increase. Full benefits, stock options, company car if you want it, and a formal written apology from me for the way your termination was handled." Peter stared at the portfolio like it might explode. "Why would you do this?" "Because I was wrong." Vanessa's voice was steady, certain. "The renewable energy division has fallen apart since you left. Your replacements don't have your vision or your dedication. The solar efficiency project you were developing is dead in the water. I need you back, not out of guilt or gratitude, but because you're genuinely talented and the company needs talent. So this is a business decision." Peter felt stupid for thinking it might be anything else. "This is me trying to fix a mistake," Vanessa corrected. "And yes, it benefits the company. But it also benefits you and your daughter. You'd be able to give her stability again, the kind of life she deserves." Lily. The mention of his daughter hit Peter right in the chest. Everything he did, every choice, came down to giving her a chance at the life her mother would have wanted for her. The life she'd had before Peter's termination turned their world upside down. "I need to think about it," Peter said, though part of him was already reaching for the portfolio, already imagining telling Lily they could move into a real apartment, that she could go back to her school with her friends. "Take the weekend," Vanessa said. "But Peter, I need you to understand something. This offer isn't charity. I'm not doing this to assuage my conscience. I'm doing it because you're exactly the kind of person Martinez Technologies needs. Someone who does the right thing, even when it costs them everything." Peter stood, suddenly desperate to get out of this glass room with its perfect temperature and exotic plants and the weight of Vanessa Westbrook's expectations. "I'll give you my answer Monday. One more thing." Vanessa rose as well, moving carefully. "The $10,000, regardless of whether you accept the position. That's not negotiable. You earned it." She nodded to Keller, who materialized with an envelope. "Cash, as requested." Peter took the envelope, feeling its weight. He should refuse it, should maintain some kind of dignity. But dignity didn't pay for prescriptions or put shoes on Lily's feet. So he tucked it into his jacket and headed for the door. "Peter." Vanessa's voice stopped him at the threshold. "Thank you. For everything. For 19-year-old me in that alley. For 2 nights ago. For being someone the world doesn't deserve." Peter left without responding, his mind churning. The drive back to the city passed in a blur. The envelope in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole, through the fabric, a tangible weight of obligation and possibility. When he got back to Mike's apartment, his sister Sarah was there with Lily. They'd brought pizza, his favorite kind even though it cost extra. Lily launched herself at him the moment he walked in, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy! Aunt Sarah said you were meeting someone about a job." Peter caught his sister's eye over Lily's head. Sarah shrugged apologetically. She'd had to tell the girl something. "Maybe," Peter said carefully, hugging his daughter close. "We'll see." They ate pizza on the couch, Lily chattering about her day at school, the robotics club meeting, a test she'd aced. Normal kid stuff that felt like medicine after the surreal afternoon at Vanessa's estate. After Lily fell asleep, Sarah made coffee, and they sat in the tiny kitchen that still smelled faintly of smoke from the fire. "So?" Sarah asked. "What happened?" Peter told her everything. The offer, the backstory about the alley 23 years ago, the money currently sitting in his jacket pocket. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to concern, to something Peter couldn't quite read. "That's a lot," she said finally. "Yeah. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Peter rubbed his face, exhaustion hitting him in waves. "Part of me wants to tell her to shove the job. She can't just buy me back because it's convenient for her company." "But," Sarah prompted, "but Lily deserves better than this." Peter gestured around the cramped apartment. "She deserves her school, her friends, stability. And I can't give her that on warehouse wages and pride." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his bandaged hand gently. "You're a good father, Peter. Whatever you decide, you're doing it for the right reasons. But can I say something? Always. Maybe this isn't about Vanessa Martinez buying you. Maybe it's about you taking back something that should never have been taken away in the first place." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "You earned that position. You spent 12 years being excellent at your job. This isn't charity. This is restitution." Peter wanted to believe that, wanted to see this as justice rather than a handout. But the truth was messier, tangled up in pride and pain, and the simple reality that he needed what Vanessa was offering more than she needed to offer it. He spent the weekend wrestling with the decision. Saturday, he took Lily to the park and watched her play with other kids, saw how she'd withdrawn over the past months, how she'd stopped asking for things because she knew money was tight. Sunday, he sat in the free clinic for 3 hours to get his burns checked because he couldn't afford the follow-up appointment at the hospital. The nurse who saw him frowned at the infection starting in one of the deeper burns, prescribed antibiotics he couldn't pay for, and sent him to the pharmacy with a prescription and a prayer. Peter sat in his car in the pharmacy parking lot, staring at that prescription. The antibiotics would cost $94. He had $86 in his checking account until his next unemployment payment. The envelope from Vanessa sat in his glove compartment, 10,000 in crisp hundreds. He thought about pride, about dignity, about being the kind of man who didn't need anyone's help. Then he thought about Lily, about how terrified she'd been when she found him passed out from fever 2 months ago during a bout of flu. He couldn't afford to treat properly. About how she'd cried and begged him to go to the doctor, and how he'd promised her he'd always take care of himself because she'd already lost her mum and couldn't lose him too. Peter opened the glove compartment and took out 500s. He filled the prescription, and when he got back to the apartment, he called Robert Keller. "Tell Ms. Martinez I accept her offer. I'll start Monday." There was satisfaction in Keller's voice when he responded. "Excellent decision, Mr. Matthews. Someone will email you the onboarding paperwork within the hour. Welcome back to Martinez Technologies." Peter's first day back at Martinez Technologies felt like stepping into an alternate reality where the past 6 months had been erased. His security badge worked. His name was on the door of a corner office 3 times larger than his old cubicle. The computer on his desk was top of the line, already loaded with his old projects and files, meticulously preserved as if waiting for his return. But it was the team assembled in the conference room that really drove home how much Vanessa Martinez had invested in getting him back. Marcus Chen stood at the head of the table, his old supervisor and mentor, grinning like Christmas had come early. "Peter, man, I can't tell you how good it is to see you back here." He pulled Peter into a bear hug that made his still healing burns ache. "The department's been bleeding talent since the restructuring. Having you as team lead means we might actually save this division." Around the table sat 8 engineers. Some faces Peter recognized, others new. They watched him with expressions ranging from hopeful to skeptical. Peter knew that look. They wanted to believe he could fix what was broken, but they'd been disappointed before. "All right," Peter said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Let's see where we're at. Someone show me the current status of the solar efficiency project." What followed was 3 hours of the most depressing project review Peter had ever witnessed. The solar panel prototype he'd been developing, a revolutionary design that could increase energy conversion by 43% while cutting production costs in half, had been completely mismanaged. His replacement had scrapped the core algorithm Peter had spent 2 years perfecting and replaced it with industry-standard calculations. The manufacturing partnership Peter had carefully negotiated with a firm in South Korea had fallen through. The timeline had been pushed back 18 months, 2 years of work, essentially destroyed. "This is fixable," Peter said finally, though his hands were shaking with frustration. "But we need to go back to the original design framework. Marcus, do we still have the prototype units?" "In storage. But Peter, the budget for this project was slashed by 60%. We don't have the resources to restart from scratch." "Then we find the resources." Peter's voice was harder than he intended. This technology could bring affordable electricity to 2 billion people who currently don't have reliable power. That's not just a product line, that's a legacy. And I'm not letting it die because some accountant decided short-term profits matter more than long-term impact. The room went silent. Several engineers exchanged glances. Peter realized he'd just implied criticism of Vanessa's management, probably not the smartest move on his first day back. But then Marcus smiled. "Now that's the Peter Matthews I remember. All right, team, you heard the man. Let's build something that matters." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and catching up on 6 months of company politics. Peter worked through lunch, barely noticing when someone left a sandwich on his desk. By 6 p.m, most of the office had emptied out, but Peter was still at his computer, rebuilding project timelines and resource allocation spreadsheets. A knock on his office door made him look up. Vanessa Martinez stood in the doorway, dressed in another expensive suit, looking every inch the CEO again. The vulnerability Peter had glimpsed at her estate was gone, replaced by the professional armor she wore in the building. "Burning the midnight oil on your first day?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Some habits don't change. There's a lot of damage to undo. Peter didn't bother hiding his frustration. "Ms. Westbrook, I need to talk to you about the solar project budget. The cuts made it essentially impossible to deliver anything meaningful." "Vanessa," she corrected, closing the door behind her. "And I know. That's why I'm here." She placed a folder on his desk. "Budget increase, effective immediately. You'll have the resources you need, but Peter, I need results. The board is watching this division closely. If we can't show progress within 6 months, they'll shut it down entirely." 6 months. Peter's stomach tightened. That was barely enough time to rebuild the prototype, never mind getting it to market-ready status. But looking at Vanessa's expression, he knew this was the best deal he was going to get. "I'll make it work," he said. "I know you will." Vanessa moved to leave, then paused at the door. "Peter, I meant what I said at my house. This isn't charity. I need you here because you're the best at what you do. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." After she left, Peter sat alone in his office, staring at the budget proposal. The numbers were generous, almost shockingly so. Vanessa was betting heavily on him, and if he failed, it wouldn't just cost him this job. It would prove right every doubt he'd had about accepting her offer. No pressure. Peter picked up Lily from his sisters at 8, later than he'd promised. She was already in her pajamas, homework spread across Sarah's kitchen table. "Sorry, kiddo," Peter said, kissing the top of her head. "First day ran long." "It's okay." Lily's eyes were bright with excitement. "How was it? Do you have a cool office? Did you see the CEO lady who you saved?" "Yes" to the cool office. "And yes, I saw Ms. Westbrook. She's very focused on the work." That seemed like a diplomatic answer. In the car, Lily chatted about her day while Peter navigated traffic, only half listening. His mind was still churning through project variables and technical challenges. It wasn't until Lily went quiet that he realized she'd asked him a question. "Sorry, what was that, sweetheart?" "I asked if we're going to be okay now." Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "Like really okay? Can we get our own place again?" Peter's heart broke a little. He'd tried so hard to shield her from the worst of their financial struggles, but kids weren't stupid. Lily had known exactly how bad things were. "Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm already looking at apartments. Found a nice 2-bedroom not far from your old school. If you want, you could transfer back for the spring semester." Lily's face lit up, like he'd just promised her Disney World. "Really? I could see Emma and Sophia again, and join robotics club." "Really?" Peter smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "Things are looking up, Lil. I promise." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Peter sat at Mike's kitchen table with his laptop, reviewing apartment listings. The prices that had seemed impossible 6 months ago were suddenly within reach. He could give his daughter stability again, a home, the life she deserved. His phone buzzed with an email from Vanessa's assistant. "Ms. Martinez has scheduled weekly one-on-one meetings with you every Friday at 4 p.m. to review project progress. First meeting this Friday. Please prepare status updates on all major initiatives." Peter stared at the email, a knot forming in his stomach. Weekly meetings with the CEO. That level of attention was either a vote of confidence or a very short leash, maybe both. The week passed in a blur of 18-hour days. Peter threw himself into the solar project with an intensity that surprised even him. It felt good to be building something again, to use his brain for problems that mattered instead of just surviving. His team responded to his energy, staying late, bringing ideas, pushing boundaries. By Friday afternoon, Peter had a comprehensive presentation ready for Vanessa. New timeline, revised budget allocation, technical, specifications for the improved prototype. He'd even reached out to the Korean manufacturing firm and convinced them to reconsider the partnership. Robert Keller collected him at 3:55, escorting him to Vanessa's office like he might bolt at any second. The CEO's suite still intimidated Peter, all that glass and expensive art, and the view that put you above the entire city. Vanessa was on a phone call when he entered, her voice sharp as she dealt with someone on the other end. "I don't care what the quarterly projections say, Richard. We're not cutting R&D funding. That's final." She hung up without saying goodbye, then smiled at Peter like the tense conversation had never happened. "Peter, please sit. Show me what you've got." For the next 90 minutes, they went through every aspect of the solar project. Vanessa asked sharp questions that revealed a technical understanding Peter hadn't expected. She pushed back on his timeline, argued about resource allocation, demanded justification for every decision. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. "This is good work," Vanessa said finally, leaning back in her chair. "Really good. If you can deliver this prototype by June, we'll have something revolutionary." "There's one problem," Peter admitted. "The field testing. We need to test the panels in actual conditions, multiple climate zones, before we can guarantee performance. That requires partnerships with international facilities, which takes time and money we don't have in the budget." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming on her desk. "What if we ran the pilot program through the Martinez Foundation? My father set up a non-profit that builds infrastructure in developing nations. We could install your panels in actual communities that need power, get real-world data, and do genuine good at the same time." Peter blinked. "That's actually brilliant. Why didn't anyone think of this before?" "Because the foundation and the company operate completely separately. Different leadership, different goals. My father was adamant about that." Vanessa's expression softened slightly. "But I'm the chair of the foundation board. I can push this through." "It would change everything," Peter said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We could have installations in Kenya, rural India, parts of South America, real data from the communities that need this technology most." "Then let's make it happen." Vanessa stood, extending her hand. "Partnership?" Peter stood and shook her hand, feeling the firm grip, the calluses he hadn't expected. "Partnership." As he left her office, Peter felt something shift. This wasn't just about having his old job back, or making Vanessa feel better about firing him. This was about building something that actually mattered, something that could change lives on a massive scale. The months that followed were the most intense of Peter's professional life. He and his team worked brutal hours, but for the first time since Sarah's death, Peter felt like he had purpose beyond just surviving. The prototype came together faster than expected. The partnership with the Martinez Foundation opened doors Peter hadn't known existed. And through it all, Vanessa was there. Not hovering, not micromanaging, but present. Their Friday meetings became the anchor of Peter's week, a chance to think strategically instead of just tactically. They argued constantly about technical decisions, budget priorities, company politics. But slowly, grudgingly, they developed a rhythm. Peter started to see past the CEO armor to the person underneath. Vanessa was brilliant but isolated, carrying the weight of a company and a legacy with no one to share the burden. She worked even longer hours than Peter, her office lights still on when he left at midnight. She remembered details about his team members, asked about Lily's robotics competitions, sent flowers when Sarah had her surgery. "You're getting attached," Marcus warned him one night over beers. "That's dangerous, man. She's still the boss. She could still decide you're expendable." "I know," Peter said, but he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. In March, 4 months after Peter's return, everything changed. Peter was in a late meeting with the manufacturing team when his phone exploded with notifications. Marcus burst into the conference room, his face pale. "Peter, turn on the news. Any channel." Peter grabbed the remote and switched on the conference room TV. Every news channel showed the same scene. Martinez Technologies headquarters, surrounded by police cars and federal vehicles. The Chiron read, "FBI raids tech company, in insider trading investigation. What the hell? Peter breathed. His phone rang. Vanessa's number. He answered immediately. What's happening? Peter. Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the fear underneath. The FBI is in my office right now. Someone on my executive team has been leaking confidential information and trading on it for months. They think it's me. That's insane. You would never. Doesn't matter what I would or wouldn't do. They have evidence. Emails from my account. Trades made through offshore accounts linked to my name. Peter, someone is framing me, and they've done it well. Peter's mind raced. What do you need? I need you to secure the R&D servers, everything we've been working on, all our proprietary technology. If the FBI seizes it as evidence, our competitors will have access through discovery. The solar project, everything we've built, it'll be stolen before we ever get it to market. Vanessa, that could look like obstruction. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. But Peter, I need you to trust me. I didn't do this. And if they take down the company looking for evidence that doesn't exist, 10,000 people lose their jobs, including you and your entire team. Peter closed his eyes. This was it. The moment where he had to decide who Vanessa Martinez really was. The cold CEO who'd fired him without hesitation. Or the woman who'd been working alongside him for months, fighting for technology that could change the world. Tell me what to do, Peter said. Over the next 72 hours, Peter barely slept. Following Vanessa's instructions and working with the company's legal team, he created encrypted backups of all critical R&D data, stored on servers outside the FBI's immediate reach, but fully accessible to legitimate legal proceedings. It was a razor's edge, protecting the company's intellectual property without actually obstructing the investigation. Vanessa was placed on administrative leave while the investigation proceeded. Her second-in-command, Richard Sterling, a 40-year company veteran and board member, took over as interim CEO. His first act was to call Peter into his office. Richard Sterling was everything Vanessa wasn't. Old money, old school, a man who believed technology companies should focus on profit margins, not saving the world. He sat behind Vanessa's desk, his expression making it clear he thought he belonged there permanently. Matthews, Sterling said, not offering Peter a seat. I'm shutting down the solar project, effective immediately. Peter's blood ran cold. You can't do that. We're 4 months from having a working prototype ready for field testing. I can, and I am. The project's budget is excessive, the timeline is unrealistic, and frankly, it's a vanity project for Vanessa's bleeding heart. This company needs to focus on profitable ventures, not charity work for the third world. Profitable ventures like insider trading. Peter couldn't stop himself. Sterling's face went red. Watch yourself, Matthews. You're only here because Vanessa has a soft spot for heroic gestures. But she's not in charge anymore. And I've been reviewing your employment history. You were terminated for cause 6 months ago. For cause? That's a lie. It was part of the restructuring. Interesting. Sterling pulled up something on the computer. Because the paperwork here says you were let go due to performance issues and insubordination. Quite a detailed file, actually. Peter's world tilted. Let me see that. Sterling turned the monitor. There, in official company documentation, was a completely fabricated performance record. Missed deadlines Peter knew he'd met. Complaints from supervisors who'd actually praised his work. A pattern of misconduct that had never happened. This is falsified, Peter said, his voice shaking with rage. Every word of this is a lie. It's what's in the system, and it means your reinstatement was questionable. I'm sure you understand why I can't keep someone with such a troubled record in a leadership position. Sterling smiled, cold and satisfied. You're terminated, Matthews. Security will escort you out. Peter stood there, stunned, as 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not when he and Lily had finally gotten stable, when he'd finally started believing things could work out. You can't do this, Peter said, but he knew it was pointless. I just did. And Matthews? Whatever relationship you have with Vanessa Westbrook, it ends now. She's facing federal charges. Association with her will only drag you down. Take my advice. Disappear quietly. Peter was escorted from the building for the second time in a year, his badge deactivated, his access revoked. But this time was different. This time, Peter wasn't just a disposable employee. He was someone who'd worked alongside Vanessa Martinez for months, who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that Vanessa had been set up. The question was, by who? And what were they really after? Standing on the sidewalk outside Martinez Technologies, his career destroyed again, Peter made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called the one person who could help him find answers. Marcus, I need you to trust me, and I need you to do something that could cost you your job. Because if Peter was going down, he was taking the truth with him, and he would prove that Vanessa Martinez was innocent, even if it destroyed what was left of his life.